Today we find ourselves in a town called Tigard, Oregon, visiting the Crescent Grove Cemetery and Mausoleum, which is the final resting place of one of the greatest wrestlers, one of the greatest villain wrestlers of all time, Rowdy Roddy Piper.
The world of pro wrestling is mourning the loss of one of its all-time greats. Saskatoon native Rowdy Roddy Piper died yesterday at his Hollywood home from a heart attack. The trash-talking star got his start in Winnipeg, but later found success in the ring and on the big screen. Angela Johnson looks back on his life.
I hear the drums, Jess. It sounds like Bagpipe City, maybe.
Rowdy rock classics like They Live.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Piper, whose real name was Roderick Toombs, started wrestling as a teen in Winnipeg. Tony Condello trained him.
Every move that you see there, I taught him.
This match against the legendary Mr. T is one that Condello remembers best. Condello says Piper was a rare star.
I knew very well right from the beginning that this kid had a lot of talent. He could talk very well on television.
One wrestling analyst says Piper was one of the most valuable wrestlers in the WWE. CEO Vince McMahon tweeted his condolences, saying Roddy Piper was one of the most entertaining, controversial, and bombastic performers ever in WWE. Piper was named into the WWE's Hall of Fame in 2005. Today, Piper's son tweeted, "I will miss him forever and always try to be the man he raised me to be." Roddy Piper was 61.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. Bad luck's always coming my way.
See those trees over there that kind of look like weeping willows and birch trees, but they're not? We've been trying to figure out what kind of trees those are, and we have no idea. So if you have any clue, please tell us. Now, this cemetery says it's established in the year 1852, which I find very interesting because this cemetery seems very new. But this is it, the Crescent Grove Cemetery and Mausoleum, the final resting place of Rowdy Roddy Piper. Usually when we travel and we're looking for famous graves and where they are located in the cemetery, a lot of times we use a site called findagrave.com. But Rowdy Roddy Piper is really, really hard. Now see, he was cremated and his ashes were put here in this cemetery. And other than that, there was really no information, so we had to ask somebody cutting the grass, because they're here the most and they see pretty much every stone in the cemetery. But here he is right here. Real name Roderick G. Toombs. Roderick G., otherwise known as Rowdy Roddy Piper, 4/17/1954 to 7/31/2015. And right below it, Kitty J, Kitty Cat Grandma, 9/16/1959. Down here it says, "Love you more than all the stars in the sky." That's nice. Growing up, Rowdy Roddy Piper was one of my favorite wrestlers. I mean, he was just a whole bunch of fun. I mean, that's how he got his name, Rowdy Roddy Piper. He was a Scottish wrestler with a big mouth, big attitude. He was the same height as me that I am right now, not as a kid. He was 6'2". And he wore a kilt. And he got the name Rowdy because he was just loud, he was quick wit, and he was just rowdy, for a lack of better words. Everybody loved him. He was the most loved and the most hated heel. And if you don't know what a heel is in wrestling, he was the villain. Probably the greatest villain known ever in wrestling history. Now, Rowdy Roddy Piper was absolutely legendary in the world of wrestling. He even had an interview segment called Piper's Pit. And he was also in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Now, I loved wrestling growing up, but I was more into movies. I still love movies. Now, one of my favorite movies growing up was a movie that came out in 1985 called The Goonies. And Cyndi Lauper did the theme song for The Goonies. She did a music video that had a whole bunch of wrestlers in it, and one of them being the Rowdy, the loudmouth, Roddy Roddy Piper.
Monkeys! Now, why don't you take your face back inside there and make a suitcase? Bye-bye.
And it was phenomenal. It still sticks with me to this day. It's like one of my favorite music videos. And then aside from that, he was also in John Carpenter's movie, They Live.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Both absolutely phenomenal things that defined my childhood. He died of a heart attack that was caused by an embolism at the age of 61. He died in they listed it as a summer home in Hollywood, California. Now, believe it or not, his death hit me really hard because towards the end of his life, he was doing a lot of horror conventions for the movie They Live. He was showing up and signing at different conventions, and I really, really wanted to meet him. And I remember when I heard of his death, when the news broke, that I was sad that I wasn't going to be able to meet him, but that he was gone because, you know, as a child, loved him in wrestling, and then as I got older, I loved him in horror movies. So it's pretty surreal to actually be kneeling here and paying our respects. It's crazy. Now, the entire time that we've been here, this little wrestling figurine has been knocked over, and Jessica and I have been trying to figure out who it was, and I think Jessica finally figured it out, that is a Bret Hart figurine. So go ahead and stand him up. I mean, the wind might knock him down eventually at some time soon, but this is it. The final resting place of Rowdy Roddy Piper. Much respect, man. Much respect. Now, like I said, finding any information online as to the final resting place of Rowdy Roddy Piper is a little difficult. There's not much, especially on findagrave.com. So if you do find yourself in Tigard, Oregon, he's buried in the very back to the left of the mausoleum. Just a heads up. It's a small cemetery, but it's nice and it's peaceful.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. Bad luck's always coming my way.